The fate of Officer Cesar Goodson is now in the hands of Judge Barry Williams. He will render his verdict Thursday. Goodson faces, of course, the most serious charges in the arrest and death of Freddie Gray. WJZ is live with complete coverage. Marcus Washington is at Courthouse East with a closer look at the case and some legal analysis of what's next. But we begin with WJZ investigator Mike Helgren live at City Hall with the final arguments from both sides. Mike?
Denise, many of these arguments are ones this judge has heard before. He seemed particularly tough on prosecutors. Some legal observers say you shouldn't read too much into that. We do know he will take to the bench sometime around 10 o'clock Thursday morning and read his verdict in open court, what will be a watershed moment in this case. The judge will issue his verdict Thursday morning in the trial of Baltimore officer Cesar Goodson. It could be a make-or-break case for prosecutors who so far have failed to secure a single conviction against any of the 6 officers charged in Freddie Gray's arrest and death.
If they can't win on this one, I think they have little chance of succeeding on the cases of the balance of the defendants.
A small group of protesters gathered outside the courthouse where inside the defense argued Gray is to blame for his own death, that his getting up inside the transport van as Officer Goodson drove caused the catastrophic spinal cord injury that killed him.
The audacity for the defense to blame this on Freddie, how low could you go?
The judge grilled prosecutors over their theory Goodson gave Gray a rough ride, expressing doubt about their evidence, a short video showing the van running a stop sign. Prosecutors say Goodson failed time and time again to get Freddie Gray any help. Goodson's defense said he never appeared injured until the final stop when a medic was called.
If there are no outward signs of medical distress, then how would Officer Goodson, who's just a police officer operating the wagon, know that Freddie Gray is in need of emergency medical help?
Sitting in the front row watching closing arguments, Officer Edward Nero, who was acquitted in the same case last month.
If there's a conviction on any of the charges, we're looking at a historic moment.
The murder charge carries a possible 30-year sentence, but there are other serious charges Officer Goodson faces, including 3 counts of manslaughter, assault, reckless endangerment, and misconduct in office. Live at Baltimore City Hall, Mike Helgren, WJZ Eyewitness News.
All right, thank you, Mike. Our complete coverage continues with Marcus Washington, who is joined by our legal expert, Adam Ruther, with analysis of today's closing arguments. Marcus?
Yeah, Mayor, a lot of people are asking questions about this. Closing arguments have ended, and now the judge will decide. Adam Ruther is here to break it all down from a legal standpoint of what's going on. So the judge has heard those closing arguments. What do you think he's doing right now, and why are we waiting until Thursday?
So Judge Williams is doing exactly the same thing that a jury would be doing under these circumstances. He's deliberating. He's taking the evidence that's been adduced at trial and presented to him in support of the state's case, and he's matching it up with the elements of the offenses under the law. And what Judge Williams is doing between now and Thursday, as he did in the Nero trial, is crafting an opinion that he's going to read to the court explaining what his verdict is. In a jury trial, they don't do that. The jury simply says guilty or not guilty on each one of the charges. But as Judge Williams did in the Nero case, and judges often do in bench trials, Judge Williams is actually likely going to explain why his verdict is what it is by going through each one of the elements and saying the state either did or didn't meet its burden to prove every one of those elements beyond a reasonable doubt.
And when we come to the case and the charges here, do you think if Freddie Gray had not died, would we have seen any charges in this case?
Well, the state's use of the law of involuntary manslaughter and depraved heart murder was certainly unusual in this case. But obviously, without there being a death of the victim, those 2 charges by definition could not have existed here. So all the state would have been left with is a decision whether if say Freddie Gray was injured but didn't die, the only charges the state would have been able to bring would have been assault, arguably, reckless endangerment, misconduct in office. And as a practical matter, it may not have ended up being high profile enough to warrant those sorts of charges under what is an unusual legal theory across the board.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for that expert advice or things that you talked about today. Also, Freddie Gray, his stepfather was in court today, as well as the head of the FOP. As far as Goodson, he remains on suspension without pay because he is being charged with a felony. Reporting live tonight, I'm Marcus Washington. Back to you.
Okay, Marcus, thank you. And here's what you need to know in the trial of Officer Caesar Goodson. The prosecution and defense both presented closing arguments today. Prosecutors alleged Goodson repeatedly breached his constitutional and administrative duties to keep Gray safe. The defense says Goodson acted reasonably under the circumstances. The verdict is expected Thursday.